Well, I hope I got to meet everybody. There might have been one or two in the back. Hi. I meant to shake your hand, but then we were getting ready to get started. You may not have noticed, but I really like people. Was it apparent? Did you notice that? So when it came time, I actually fell in love with photography when I was 16 years old. My great aunt Naomi was a nursing professor at Loma Linda University in California. She retired from Loma Linda and took up photography at the age of 79. She became a professional fine art photographer. And she was awesome. I loved everything about what she did. I loved what she taught me about photography. And I just fell in love with the art form. Went on to have 4 kids, really wanted beautiful photography of my children, had some really amazing relationships with professional photographers over the years. And then when my youngest was about 4, we had the opportunity to purchase a studio. And as it turns out, that studio wasn't paying its sales taxes. And in Texas, if you don't pay your sales tax, but you collect sales tax for 7 years, they will put you in jail. And if you purchase that studio, they will seize your assets and get you in trouble, even though you weren't the one doing it. So oddly enough, we decided not to purchase that studio. I know it's shocking news, but am I rocking back and forth too much for you? You want me to stay in one place? Are you good? We decided to open our own studio. So over 20 years ago, I started Lasting Images Photography in Sherman, Texas, and I started studying like crazy because I knew what I liked. I had a good eye, but I still needed more technical knowledge. What got me through those first few years was how much I love people and how well I treated my clients. And then after that, I had enough technical knowledge to take it from there. But that was an interesting few years, learning all the things and practicing all the time, all the things. As I got going, I realized that I love bird photography and I love Milky Way photography and I love all those other kinds of photography. But the thing that really set me on fire day after day and has for over 20 years is working with people. I love their stories. I love their expressions. I love the things they do together when they don't think I'm watching. I love being in nature and having that backlight hit their hair into that rim light on their shoulders. And I mean, there's nothing better to me than a beautifully crafted portrait of a human being that tells a story about them in some way. So that's what I do. That's what I love doing. And hopefully that tells you a little bit about me. I actually just finished my term as president of Arizona PPA. And I know I spoke over here to a couple of ladies about that. Arizona PPA is Arizona Professional Photographers of America. We're affiliated with the national organization, and we have a group that meets in Phoenix, and they're awesome. So if you want more photography, and this isn't enough, come and join us as well. I'm certainly not going to take away from this beautiful group, but I will tell you that that it's a very kind and lovely group, and we have a yearly state image competition with feedback. So if that's not something that you have done, that's one of the fastest ways you can get better, is to put your work before a jury of your peers and hear what they have to say about it, which it sounds like you do that every month with critique. Yeah, this is just critique on steroids a little bit. All right, well, let's get going. So you're going to see some of my work, and I am not sure why it's not going. There we go. Let's try it again. You're supposed to just go. And it's not gonna. So this is what we call life, right? Yes. Life happens. And as I said to Dave earlier, flexibility is the key to happiness, right? So these are just some things that I have done over the last 20 years. There's a story behind every single one of these images that I could still tell you because they mean something to me. The screen is a little hot. Just pretend it's more beautiful than it really is up there. The occasional dog creeps in. Thank you. Thank you so much. That collection, like I said, of images is some of my favorite work from the last 20 years. And I really can tell you a story about every single one of those images. And I don't know why I remember details like when a client will call after 4 years of not seeing me, and they'll say, I'm ready for another portrait. And I'll say, that sounds awesome. Last time you were at this location and your family was wearing these colors. And they'll go, how do you know that? I don't know. It's one of my superpowers. Everybody's got them. I am passionate about creating a visual history for your family, for yourself. And I think we've all been around long enough to know that we've seen a revolution happen in the age of imagery. Like, we have more images to look at than we ever have before, but how many of them are actually ending up in our hands or on our walls or a tangible thing that we're able to touch and look at? Not very many. In fact, I would say most children that have been born in the last 5 to 7 years are lucky if their parents have a few printed images of them. Most of them are on their phones. And a lot of them are not even using professional photographers anymore because they don't know the difference anymore between a fine art portrait or a really beautifully done portrait and something they put through a few filters on Instagram. That's sad to me. And when you educate people and when you actually show them what a beautiful portrait looks like, that's got proper lighting and proper exposure and good composition and a beautiful thought intention about maybe what you were wearing and how that relates to the background, well, all of a sudden, it's almost like, the scales have fallen off their eyes and they can't unsee it. My children will tell you that I've ruined bad photography for them because when they see it, they're like, oh my gosh, it's so bad. And it's because I've done that to them over the last 20 years. I've pointed out the flaws, and we were having a little giggle in the back of the room earlier about an unfortunate member of the royal family's editing. And I feel for her because we've all been there. We've all missed a clone stamp or two. But if I were the Princess of Wales, I would want someone to check my work. Just saying, before I sent it out to AP and hoped it was okay, and the Queen's plaid skirt is not matching up, and someone's hair is clone stamped, and it's a whole, what we call a dumpster fire over at our house. But bless her heart, I feel for her. The importance of a visual record, a visual history of your family. That comes from being intentional about who you are, who your family is, and how you want to be represented to the world, right? What story you want to tell and how you want your family to be remembered in the future. So I like to ask these questions. In fact, I met with, I have a virtual assistant, and he and I were rewriting. If you go to my website and you sign up for Let's Stay in Touch, you'll get a series of 5 emails that will tell you a little bit more about me and what I love and why it's important to me. And we were rewriting the wording of those emails to more closely match, the ethos, pathos. There's a whole psychology to how you do a nurture sequence of emails. And so I'm meeting with Liam, and I'm telling him, this passion that I have for creating visual history. And I go into this like impassioned speech for like 5 minutes, and he's like, okay, those are the words I needed. I'm just going to write those down. That's what we're doing in the email. But how often do we think about why we take pictures? Why are you doing it? Why do my clients come to me and want a portrait done to begin with? That's one of the first questions I ask them is, why are we doing this portrait? What's the occasion? What's the reason? Is there something you're needing to celebrate or mark or remember? I need to know that, because that helps me tell that story that I want to create for you. But we do want to remember how we felt, where we were, which is who did I talk to that loves travel photography? Yes, we want to remember where we were, right? Jeff and I just went. Oh, I should introduce my husband, Jeff. He's in the back of the room. He carries all my equipment. He's awesome. Yes, head Sherpa. We just were in Italy for 3 weeks in October, and I had never taken him. I've been to Italy several times, but he had never been to Italy. So we went to Tuscany and stayed in a 500-year-old villa just outside of Florence. And then we came to Rome because he had never been to Rome. And so we spent a week in Rome. And everywhere I looked, it was beautiful. The light was beautiful. The food was beautiful. The people were amazing. I mean, I love Italy. Don't get me wrong. I'm very obsessed with Italy. But what was interesting about that experience was I wanted to take so many pictures to remember, because I knew I was coming back here and I wanted to remember what it felt like to be there. So that's why I love travel photography specifically. But we also want to remember the people and the places and the experiences that matter to us. And that's what I'm talking about when I say, let's create a visual history. How many of you have pictures of you with your best friend? Good. I would expect nothing less from a camera club. But the rest of the people in the world forget. They almost forget some of the people that matter the most to them. Like, I had work friends that really, really meant something to me 20, 30, 40 years ago. I don't have any pictures of them. We forgot. We didn't take the time. There are friends and acquaintances that I've known over the years that I wish I had a picture of. I forgot. I didn't take the time. I wasn't intentional. But if we want to tell a piece of our story, we need to think those things through, because from the very first portraits that we take. So this is Grayson. I was there when Grayson was born. I was there through his mom's whole labor, and I was there for his first few moments of life. He's now 14 years old. So sweet. That's a precious moment. They have a whole album of that day that's all black and white. That's beautiful, that I'm so proud of. And then I want to tell you about this. This is my father. He is sitting in my studio for the very first time. He's 106 and a half years old, and he's holding a portrait of himself at 25. This is my father's last portrait. He died 3 months later. And I will tell you that he knew the importance of this. My father was a lifelong photographer. He loved photography. And I remember his scrapbooks of snapshots of travel, of photography that he took, the pictures of every girlfriend in every town he ever lived in, because my father was a very, very handsome man, and he didn't get married until he was 50. He had me when he was 50 years old. Yeah. And my mom was 25, so it was one of those May, December things, I know. But my father spoke 9 languages. He was a diplomat. He had traveled everywhere. He had met everyone. He was fascinating, fascinating individual. When he came in for this portrait, my husband held him up. He was so frail and so weak that it took everything he had to sit in that chair for the 40 minutes that we did that portrait. It's priceless to my family. It took everything out of him. He was in bed for 3 days after this portrait. But he knew, and I could see it in his eyes when he looked at me, he knew it would be his last portrait. And he knew that it mattered, that it was important to his family. I submitted this to PPA International Print Competition, and it was nominated for what's called a Grand Imaging Award, which is kind of like the Oscars of photography at PPA. It's my highest scoring image I've ever had, and I don't care about all that. I just care that we did that. It was so beautiful, that moment when he and I connected, because his photography had always been important to him, and it was important to me, and we were connected in that moment, in a common purpose, which was to remember. It's in the eyes. It is. So how many of you have been aware of the series of images called the Brown Sisters? So the Institute of Contemporary Art in Boston, you know what I'm talking about? Okay, Nicholas Nixon's wife and her sisters for 42 years have lined up in the same order mostly. Sometimes they get to decide. And he has taken a portrait of them every year for 42 years, since they were young up until now. And so those images were hanging in order at the Institute of Contemporary Art in Boston. There's you can read this. There's a really fascinating article where he just talks about that process. And he talks about how sometimes, and you can see it in the portraits, sometimes they do not look happy to be there. I do not know how he got them to do that every year for 40. And as they got older, some of them started complaining because they didn't like how they looked. But that body of work is a visual history of those women. It's priceless. It's fascinating that he has this whole lineup of them, and you need to go look at them if you don't know what those look like. They're amazing, intentional, and the human experience. I love it. So I wanted to experiment with movement, and this is the weird thing that happens to me. I'll get an idea and it'll burrow its way into my head, and it will live there and bug me until I can get it out by doing it. Do you have that problem? Is that not just me? Okay, good. This idea had come to me, and I knew I was going to use this family. They live here in Prescott. They have 3 teenage daughters. And how many of you have had 3 teenage daughters at one time? Or even just one, because one is enough sometimes. I had 2, and 2 boys. But these girls and this mother, I wanted them to show the chaos of being the mother of teenagers. And you can see it in her face. I wish you could see it on my screen. It's a little darker and moodier. She's so resolute. And then I told them, I want each of you to turn a different way. We used the modeling light on my studio light and slowed the shutter speed down so that we could capture that movement. And then, of course, Mom couldn't move because I needed her eyes to be sharp. And that's almost straight out of the camera. And when she saw it, she was like, oh, yeah, that's how I feel all the time. Because that's what I wanted to tell. That's the story I wanted to tell. Yes. They are standing. Honestly, I needed her to stay still. That's why. That's why I sat her down, because I knew she wouldn't shake as much if she was seated. So I also wanted her, I really wanted her in the center of the image. And then I just wanted, like I said, that chaos all around her. And then the title, how many of you have seen The Burning Dog? I'm fine, it's fine, everything's fine. That happens a lot in COVID, but that's a story for another day. It's a meme. You can look it up. I love high school senior photography. It has gotten to where, see, for the last 20 years, I've done thousands and thousands of senior portraits. And I love it because they're on the cusp of something. They're leaving something behind and they're on the cusp of something else, and they're a little bit unsure as they take that flying leap, but it's so much fun to hear their plans and what they're doing and what they did and just who they are. These two, this was my assistant Colton and this was my oldest daughter Melanie, and that image is called Are We There Yet? Because senioritis was real for both of those two. It was something else, definitely. Again, I could tell you stories about all of these kids. They're amazing, and senior photography makes me happy. So I also love travel photography, and this was a trip to Beijing. So the lady on the left is a garbage collector. That's her job. She isn't paid very much at all. And that little cart, she just goes around and picks up little scraps of garbage and any trash, and anything she can salvage, she will then sell. And my guide, who spoke fluent Mandarin, took me into the old part of Beijing. That's where I wanted to go. And she met this lady, and I said, would you please ask her if I could do a portrait of her? And that's what she said. Why would anyone want a picture of me? And in that moment, I really wanted a picture of her because I thought, oh, wow, that was a hard moment. I hope I did her justice. That trip was fascinating because it's a culture I had never observed before. I'd never immersed myself in, and there's so much that is so ancient. I showed it to her on the back of the camera. Mm-hmm. I think it just overwhelmed her that anyone noticed her. I don't think she felt seen very often. In fact, my guide said she is one of the invisible people in Beijing. And I said, not to me at all. That was a really interesting, yeah, very interesting. Mm-hmm. So my studio is called Lasting Images. So I really do play on time a lot because it slips by. Time passes, moments that you thought would last forever are done and they're gone, and you can't remember them anymore unless you've made an image of them, right? Or written something down about them. So I love this picture. Let me tell you a little bit about these people. These are my father's sisters and his mom and dad and his brother. And my family came from Jerusalem. My father sponsored each member of his family. It took them 10 years to be together again for the first time. And this table filled with food is, in Arab culture, the best. Like, you've got to have a table filled with food because that's how you show how much you love your people, is you feed them. My Nana, oh my goodness, if you hadn't had 3 helpings, you didn't love her. I mean, that was just how that rolled. So yeah, and their expressions, I love how natural and beautiful they are. And I don't care about those shadows on the wall, though I would have pulled them 6 feet away, but that's not important. That's, that's me going, I can just send it off to retouch up. It'll be fine. My dad went to Europe just before World War II with his friends, and they did this big road trip. And he ended up in Paris. And my dad was a wonderful swimmer. He was swimming one morning, and the French Olympic team in 1939 was practicing at the same pool, and they recruited him to be a member of the French Olympic team. I'm not even kidding. This really happened. And then the war broke out, and he barely got out of France alive. But that's them in Italy. And my dad joined the US Army in Egypt. He was everywhere. That's just some schoolmates of his. All these people are gone now. Every one of them isn't here anymore. But they all lived robust, amazing lives that we want to remember. I want to remember these people. And that's why it's really important to take portraits, at least according to me, right? So let me tell you a little bit about the crazy things that go on in my brain. You may want to buckle up. So when I meet with a client, I do ask, like I said earlier, the question, why are we doing this portrait? What's the reason behind it? What's the occasion? And that gives me a frame of reference, right? That's where I start crafting whatever that story is going to be. And then from there, I really do think about the best way to tell that story. I think that often we're snapping away without crafting a story to go with it. And that's where sometimes you'll see images that fall short and they're missing something. Some of the things that are missing sometimes are crafted in lack of expression or a composition that just goes out the edge of the images of the image, the sides of it. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't hold you in. Or the lighting doesn't match the subject matter. Have you ever seen a baby lit super harshly, like with a 5-to-1 lighting ratio? It looks weird. And then I have to think about, how am I going to light them? So I'm sure you've met people who are natural light photographers, and that's all they do. I'm a light photographer. I like light. I like good light. I can use a strobe. I can use the sun. I can use a flashlight if I have to. I can use a street lamp. I've done that before. I can use just a reflector and, you know, whatever light is around. Because I'm a photographer that uses light, any kind of light, and crafts it and shapes it. So I have to make decisions about what kind of light is best going to tell that story. So when we do a fine art black and white portrait, for instance, I don't want a super brightly lit room most of the time. I want it to be pretty dark and moody. If I'm doing a baby, like I said earlier, I want it to be soft and sweet and have a pretty kind of wraparound light that's not harshly lit, or a highlight to shadow transition that's very, very hard edged. So those are all decisions that you make. What are your camera settings going to be? Do you want the background in or out of focus? Are there going to be things coming out of their head? Are we moving them over? You know what I mean? Like, we have to make all these decisions this fast. And I'm also dealing with toddlers that are running around, and dad who did not want to be there and has had 3 margaritas. Yes, that has happened to me. And mom who is so haggard because she has spent the last 3 weeks gathering outfits and bribing children and giving her husband those 3 margaritas so he would even show up. And then everyone's there, and she is praying that she has not made a terrible mistake and that they're not going to make her pay for it all the way home and all the next week. So I am part psychologist. I am part magician, because when the aunt shows up and she's wearing a green outfit, even though everybody else was told to wear blue, and I sent out a style board and they all got the information, but she's still in the weird lime green, I have to calmly reassure mom, it's okay. I can take care of that. And the teenager who shows up and he's got a giant zit on the end of his nose and he doesn't even want to be there anymore, again, don't worry, I've got this. It's going to be okay. And we get him into place. And the sister who doesn't get along with the brother, oh, let me tell you about the couple that I photographed with all of their adult children one time. So we get there, and I keep trying to put mom and dad next to each other, and they keep moving or glaring at each other. And I'm like, okay, what is going on? I get to the end of the session. It's fine. We get through it all. I get to the end of the session, and one of the daughters, my client, pulls me aside and she says, I forgot to tell you, mom and dad have been separated for 20 years. They hate each other. That would have been great to know. I would have loved to have known that. But what's interesting is dad passed unexpectedly 3 months later, and they had those portraits of their family. So that's happened a lot, actually, to me, where we will do a portrait and then something will happen and I will realize how incredibly important that moment was, that we didn't miss it. One of the portraits that you saw in that slideshow was one where we really had to move heaven and earth. We had 2 members of the family. It's the one with the 3 kids that are sitting on the bridge that's painted. And if you come into my studio, it's a 40 by 60 acrylic in my sales room. And 2 of the kids were special forces, military, and one was in college, and it was during COVID. And for some crazy unknown reason, the 2 military kids got leave at the same time, and everyone was in town at the same time. And the mom called me and she said, "Can we do a portrait?" And I said, "Absolutely." I cleared my calendar and we went out and did the portraits that day. And I mean, magic. Sometimes the stars align and it just happens. And I do believe in serendipity like that. Do you believe that you affect the outcome of every portrait that you take? How? Do you know who Jerry Johannes is? Yeah. Or Jerry Johannes? He is a fabulous photographer, very, very skilled wedding photographer, also portrait photographer. He lives in Las Vegas now, and go look him up. His work is so beautiful. Jerry can walk into any room. He could walk into this room and see Stephanie sitting over there by that gray table, and he would make an award-winning portrait of her just sitting there. Absolutely. I'm not even kidding. He's a magician that way. He's like the MacGyver of photography, because he'll walk in and just like make stuff happen with nothing. Because I used to be a wedding photographer, and how many of you have walked into a wedding venue that you aren't familiar with and gone, "All righty, Longhorn Ranch Party Barn. This is not one I've been to before, and I'm going to have to make that giant 16-foot tall silver cross in the middle and the barnwood look awesome in every picture." So Jerry, I took a class with him, and he said this. He said, "If you want to be a better photographer, be a better human being." Isn't that great? He's right. Because the energy you bring into the camera room or onto the set or onto the location, and the kindness with which you deal with your clients, with the family that's trusted you, with the scared senior in high school, with the guy who's coming in for his headshot and hates having his portrait done because he's never had a good one. How many times have I heard that? I don't take good pictures. This is somebody on the phone, by the way, if you don't know what this is. Somebody on the phone. I don't take good pictures. And I always say, "Okay, we'll see. I'll see you at 9 tomorrow." And then we go into the sales room after the session, and I put them up, and they're like, "Wow, I look good." And sometimes that's the first time they've realized that, because they haven't had someone pose and light them correctly or show them what could be possible if they have the right things done. I'm not saying I'm the best, but I'm not shabby at it. It's worth doing. It's worth learning how to do correctly. But yes, that energy that you bring, for sure. The other thing is your preconceived notions about the people that you're photographing. So I learned long, long, long ago not to assume anything about anyone. I had clients who lived in a trailer, drove a 25-year-old car, but valued photography and saved up for it. And I had clients who drove a very nice new Mercedes and lived in a big house and could care less about having their family on the wall. Didn't matter to them at all. It has nothing to do with how much money you have. I want to know that you love this art form and that you love your people and that you value having a visual history. That's all I care about, for sure. And then we come to post-processing. How many of you believe that Photoshop is a tool that can be used to enhance your portraits and sell them better? Yes. Excellent. So do we have any purists in here who believe that it should come right out of the camera and we shouldn't ever touch it? Is that you, really? She's like, "I'm leaving." No, there's something to be said for that. You know what I love about photographers is there's room at the table for everyone. And photographers, to me, I've been doing this for a while, I've been with a lot of you, are the kindest, most generous people I've ever met. They really are. I walked into the room and met each one of you, and every single person here greeted me and was talking to me about what they did and was enthusiastic about their stuff. And I was like, yes, I'm in another room with my people, my tribe. Yeah. I've never met a stranger, but I didn't have to because I was among friends. So it doesn't matter if you like Photoshop or don't, or if you like black and white or not, or if you're a Sony girl like I am, or if you love Canon. Who are my Sony people? Yes. I will convert the rest of you. Post-processing for better or worse. So we don't want it to be for worse. What are some things that could happen in the for worse? What are some things that happen? We already talked about the plaid skirt and poor Kate Middleton, but what are some other things that happen in the for worse? Have we all been through, I think there were some filters about 15 years ago that were super popular that blew out everyone's highlights and made them look kind of ethereal. Yeah, Kevin Kubota had some filters that were really popular back then. Lord of the Rings was one of my favorites, and that one, did some stuff to people. And then there was the era of Lucius Art. Anybody remember Lucius Art? The really over sharpened, crispy details on the edges of everything. Stephanie, you remember that? That was super hip for a while there, right? Oh, remember colorized selective color when you'd color their eyes at the blue and then everything else was black and white? That was so popular back in 2004. Yeah. It's like backsplash tile. If I can look at it and tell you what year you remodeled your kitchen, no, that is not timeless. And I'm all about timeless. So we try and be authentic, but also not trendy. I don't want my clients to wear trendy clothing because I want that large portrait that they paid for hanging on their wall to not look outdated in 5 years. All the images that you saw, some of those were taken 20 years ago. Most of the time you can't tell. Post-processing, for better or worse, is making the portrait better and not detracting from the authentic beauty that's already there. So I'll get rid of a few pimples, I'll soften up some wrinkles, I'll soften some skin down, and I'll swap a head or 2 or 11. I just did a family of 23 and I swapped 11 heads. And they all needed it. Every single one of those 11 people needed their head swapped. And it looked great when we got done. But I try not to call it head swapping because people feel very uncomfortable with the fact that I'm ripping off their kids' heads and putting someone else's. No, we call it expression swapping. A little softer. Okay, this is really cool. Put yourself on the other side of the camera sometime. Don't you fail me, internet. It's going to fail me. An error occurred. Okay, so here's what it was. It's called Reflect, and Canon Australia did it, and it's on YouTube, so go watch it. But here's what it was. It was 3 photographers, and they brought them into the Canon lab in Australia, and they said to each one of them, what are 3 questions that you ask your portrait subjects to get them to open up? And this is funny because as I was rewriting all of my emails this week, I went into email number 2 and I asked all these deep existential questions, all like at the beginning of the email. And Liam said to me, you really like to lead with an existential question, huh? That's pretty, like you're getting personal pretty quick here. And I said, oh yeah, I never even thought about that. Well, one of the photographers, his 3 questions were like super personal and very existential. And then another one was like, what's your hobbies? What do you like to do? And the third one just had some generic questions. Well, they sat them down and they're like, all right, you're going to meet your subject now. And then they brought the screen up and they had a video of each one of those photographers talking, and they were separated, so they weren't sitting together. They did this one at a time. And the first one, the existential question guy, he's like, oh, I'm the subject. I'm doing a self-portrait. And then they showed their process of how they did that. The portraits were beautiful, and they were all completely different because they're completely different photographers, but they all said, I forgot how it felt to be on the other side of the camera. When was the last time you were on the other side of the camera? Jeff and I just did a fine art portrait. It's called Black Labels. So if you've been on my website, I was chosen one of 9 studios in the country to come and study with Sony Artisan of Light is it Artisan of Light? What's she called? Artisan of Light? Let's just call her that. Monica Sigmund. She's one of the Sony really big photographers, and she does this beautiful Annie Leibovitz, Mark Seliger style fine art photography, and that's our luxury line. So I went and studied with her, and then we, at the end of the week, were photographed by her. So we'd been photographing other people all week, And then we get to the end and we go into full hair and makeup. And I'm about, how many pounds heavier was I? 50? Yeah, probably 50 pounds heavier than I am right now. Jeff and I have both lost a lot of weight this last year, but I was feeling extremely vulnerable in that moment. I'm in my mid 50s, so I don't look like I used to, and I'm heavier than I want to be, and I'm in this evening gown, and she's doing my fake eyelashes, and she's doing my hair big, and hair helmeting it into a full Dallas, Texas hair is real. And we get in front of the camera, and I'm like, oh, this is what it feels like to be my clients. I had forgotten. Got done with that session and didn't forget. And I have so much more empathy for what I just described to you, that harangued mom that I described to you. It's because I try and keep that within me. I try and celebrate that woman. I try and celebrate that family that has come together and wants to remember that moment. It's important. It's what we do. So go watch Reflect, because it was a really interesting exercise with those 3 photographers. Okay, what do you want to know from me? What piqued your interest? What questions do you have? Did I talk too much? Too fast?
I don't know, but I want to see your idea with my oldest daughter, where you portrayed the mother and her 3 kids.
Yeah.
My daughter has 4 kids, granddad 4 times.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Right. Right.
That is so wicked.
Yeah.
And she'll even like it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And movement's really interesting. It's really happening right now. A lot of people are exploring movement in still imagery. Yeah.
It's chaotic. It tells the story itself.
It's really cool. Yeah.
Even though you're trying to focus on the center of the woman, you still see the movement.
Yeah.
Even though the focus on that woman caught my attention, understand the chaos just by the movement. And that's real. See, that's the thing that's the beauty of that shot. That's real.
It is real. And you can see it in her eyes. She's living that life. Trust me. That's why I selected that mother and teenagers carefully. Bill, yes.
Did you do your own prints or have that done? Or
That's such a great question. I want to learn to print myself. I've tried it and failed so miserably that I trust the best labs in the country to print my work. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, David. Twice. Yeah, I have. So what I did, I'm trying to think of the second one. You know what? Here's what I will tell you. I am unflinchingly honest with my clients, always. I don't lie to people. I don't talk about my clients behind their backs to anyone. Well, we live in a small town. I lived in a small town in Texas as well. And also, that's crappy behavior. Don't do it. So I don't do it. I love my people. So when I come to them with, I have your best interests at heart, I'm a human being, and I want to make sure that you are delighted with your portraits. One time we had a card that failed, and one time we had a camera malfunction. So they were both like equipment things. I think I had one client who didn't like her picture. She didn't like how she looked in her pictures and she wanted to redo them. So I said, absolutely, I want you to be delighted. I want you to be happy. Yes, let's do it again, for sure. I come to it with humility, I guess is the best way I would say. Here's what happened with the equipment, or here's what happened with you didn't like your pictures. Let's fix it. What would you like me to do? You want to reshoot? Let's do it. Let's do it better. Let's figure out what happened here that you weren't happy with, and let's do it a different way. Or we're not going to use that card again. It's got a big black X and it's going, the way I approach it is the way I approach everything, which is openness. Just here's what happened and here's how I'm going to fix it. And I'm sorry. And by the way, I'm giving you a free whatever. Yeah, free whatever. Anything else? Yes.
Well, it's more of a technique question.
Okay.
You mentioned you're a Sony.
Yes.
I'm not familiar with Sony. Sorry.
That's okay.
See you later about
No. I was Canon for 19 years.
But I do know there are cameras that's got dual
Card slots.
card slots.
Mm-hmm.
All right. When you photograph
Mhm.
the portraits, does Sony have that dual card
Yes.
slot? Do you save in RAW
Yes.
and JPEG?
I save only in RAW.
In RAW, okay. So
Mhm.
so you
Double
transfer
RAW.
it. Okay, good. All right.
Yeah,
So you make that a practice
I
and
do.
have a backup.
Backups for everything because I'm a professional photographer. My clients have paid me to take care of them. They've paid me to think about every detail. They've paid me to take care of all of the things that could go wrong. I have double cameras, double lenses, double everything. 100%. I try and anticipate everything that could go wrong. Yes.
You just use Photoshop for your post processing or do you have?
I have some plugins that go into Photoshop. I use Luminar, Neo, and I'm really sad that Topaz died. Topaz Impressions, I mean, they're not, yeah, you can't buy it anymore. So don't lose your, not impressions. Yeah, they still have that other thing, but the things that I used, they don't have anymore.
It's not the full thing.
It's not the full thing. Yeah. It's not the same. How many of you don't like learning new software? My husband is a computer scientist. He will tell you that resistance to change is a human thing, and I am the worst case he's ever known. But I'm right up there. I'm probably right up there. I don't like learning new things that I am forced to learn like that. Like I was very happy with my Topaz impressions and my Topaz textures and my, Sharpen AI I do like though. Gigapixel, I use that one. Yeah, that's good. Yes.
Can I ask you a question about framing?
Yeah.
So my wife gets mad at me because I shoot or I'll crop.
Are you cropping in the camera, David? Okay.
Everything wrong. But anyway, so then I always have to custom frame. It's like way expensive. So why don't you just shoot a normal, aspect ratio? That I can just go out and buy a frame at Hobby Lobby and put it. So I was going to ask you for your clients,
Mm-hmm.
do you normally shoot a specific aspect ratio in mind for like, so they don't have the custom frame they can do, or is that part of the discussions you have up front? Because framing can get expensive.
Framing can get expensive. I have two preferred framers in town. Framers Market is one of them, and then Wholesale Framing in Prescott Valley is the other one with Brad and Mary. They're awesome. And they're both great. And then I have a preferred framer in Sherman, Texas as well. And I actually go with my clients to the framing appointment. I want to be a part of that if they want me to, and they all do. It's part of, it's an artistic choice. And that's one of the reasons I pick my framers, because I want to make sure that they're going to not misguide my clients or push them towards something ugly, because I don't want my stuff framed in an ugly way. As far as custom sizes versus regular sizes, I don't crop until they order. So I will take the picture and I will show it to them and I will say, I think it would be beautiful on your wall in this size. We've already looked at this wall. We have this software where you can actually take a picture of your wall with a piece of paper on it and then it resizes it. And so I use that, ProSelect is what it's called. I use that to put their image in a frame on their wall in what I consider to be the right size, because they trust me. They're going to listen to some recommendations, right? They've come to a professional to get recommendations on the sizes that might be best for that wall. Most of the time, it's going to be a standard size, but still custom framed. If it needs to be an unusual size, I will say, I made an artistic choice here for this reason. I really like negative space where the subject is here and there's this, lofty space above them or to the side of them. And some people would argue, practical people, logical people, people I don't understand, would argue that that's a waste of framing money, right? Well, you have all this empty space, but you and I understand that that's not it at all. It's an artistic style. It's a choice that I made. So usually they're framing standard sizes because I price them according to a square, a 20 by 24, a 24 by, there are standard sizes and we usually stick to those. What else have you got?
No, I will say, to add to his point.
Yeah.
I want my picture the way I want it.
Yeah.
The composition to be.
Yeah.
I don't care what the size is.
Yeah.
But I can also make my own custom mat,
Mhm.
cut it. And it's not that expensive to do it yourself.
Right.
And use a normal size frame that is, off the wall.
It's true. And I will say with my fine art portraits, wall portraits, most of the time they don't have a mat around them. Most of the time they're on a canvas or on fine art paper with brush stroking over them. And so the size is the size. There's no mat that I can hide behind most of the time. What else have you got? What else do you want to know? Yes.
How do you get people to relax?
I am a goofball. I don't know if you've noticed, but I try to just be really relaxed and natural and abnormally normal, so that they forget that they're in front of the camera. It is the trick, because when people are so self-conscious in front of the camera, they forget to just have fun. So I'll tell jokes, I'll do dumb things. I have a lizard that dances on my head. Yeah, crazy stuff. And I'm talking a mile a minute when I'm getting started. I try and remember everybody's names, and then I'm just talking to the kids. Like I just did that family of 23, and there were these 3 little boys in the front that were grandsons. And they were the cutest little expressions, and just the way that they were moving. I was like, you are a rock star. You have not dropped that smile once. Now, what about your grandmother? What is she doing? Like, I'm just playing off of people and talking to them and just helping them forget that we're doing a session. And while I'm doing that, I'm clicking, because I've back button focused, and I'm clicking while I'm talking to them, because I've got, the back of my camera has the screen, so I can see it, and I know we're good. And so I'm talking to them and laughing at them and with them, and they don't even realize that I'm photographing the whole time, which is why I had those 11 heads to swap. For sure. Yes.
You always have, well, always is a loaded word, but client looking into the camera or looking away, or?
Yeah, not always looking into the camera. Mm-mm. And sometimes I'll have Jeff second shoot for me, and I love the ones where he comes in from the side and they're looking at me. I love those. They love those. That's like a timeless thing. Yeah.
I do street photography.
I love street photography. You don't want them looking at you.
Want them to be looking at the camera. That's not what they normally do.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Any other questions? So quiet on the back row. So go ahead, David. Sorry. No, you're good.
So make paper recommendations, like I want to build
Barada, yeah.
Yeah, or whatever, and so are you, based on what you're shooting, like that recommendation?
Absolutely. Fine art black and white. I have certain paper that I do like Barada. Henna Mule, beautiful. Yeah. That fine art torn edge, floating mount. Yeah, I love all that for sure. For my luxury line, the Black Label line, there is a specific paper that it goes on and a specific way that it's printed, and it's only done that way, and it can only go on that paper. It does not go on canvas. It does not go on it just doesn't go any other way. Those are fine art prints. My canvases are stripped emulsion canvases from BWC in Dallas. BWC is a great lab. If you don't use them, you should. They're absolutely fantastic, and they do a really good job for me, for sure. And then my gallery wraps are those stretch canvases with the image wrapped around the edges. I like those framed in a shadow box frame most of the time now, because I had a client, doctor's wife in California, say to me, I don't want anything that looks like I got it at Costco. And as a high-end luxury boutique photographer, neither do I want you to have anything that looks like you got it at Costco. So immediately, all the wraps in my studio got a frame around them, because I thought, oh, we are not playing that game. It's not happening. Not at all. Okay, what other secrets shall I expound on? It is funny, right? Anything I can get at Costco. What do you wish that you had taken a portrait of that you missed? That's gone. Your parents.
Yeah.
I did. Hi, how are you? See, never met a stranger. I did something a few years back, and then I did it again this last July that I loved. How many of you remember the play Our Town by Thornton Wilder? That one gets me right here. And the scene where Emily is sitting at the table with her mother, it's after she's died and she's gone back and she's sitting and remembering the most perfect day, which was a day when she was 12 years old and she was sitting at the kitchen table with her mother. And I thought to myself, those are the moments that we don't pay attention to. The perfect moments that are gone so fast and we didn't even realize how perfect they were. And so I decided to make that a product, and it's called A Day in the Life. And I did it with a client in Texas. I don't do them very often because it takes me literally a day. And then I called my cousin in California, and both of her kids love to surf off of Laguna Beach. And I said, Kim, I want to do a Day in the Life album. I want to do it with a Graphy Studio product. If you don't know what Graphy Studio is, you should look them up. They are amazing. And they have an album that's a 12x8 album that sits in a wooden box. And then when you open the lid, it has a movie screen in the lid. So we shot video and we shot still images of those kids on San Clemente Beach early one morning this last July, surfing with their parents watching them, 13 and 16 years old. And I said to Kim, this is in my head. It's been in my head for 3 years. We've got to get it out. Please help me. I am afflicted. And we did this thing. And the album came out so perfect. It was so good because it was just, Bo, walking down the beach with his wetsuit halfway down and his surfboard. And Juliana walking with her brother and her hair's blowing and they're looking at somebody that's got a drone that's just above the waves. And mom and dad, they're like cheering and, so excited when they hit that wave. Those kids are going to be gone in 5 years. That moment will be over and they will not have it anymore, but they will because they bought the album with the box and the video. So perfect. Yeah, that one made me really happy. What else? Your parents? Yeah. I know. I was a photographer, but I was always so busy that I missed a lot of moments of my own kids. I took plenty, but I didn't take all of them that I wanted to. And I didn't do enough video, I'll tell you that. Do you love video? I love video. Now I want to be a cinematographer. So now I want to go back and I'm like, oh my gosh, the new Sony A7R9 takes 120 frames a second. And Monica, my mentor and teacher, was just at WPPI demonstrating it in the Sony booth, and she was using it for dancers. And so they would jump and come down, and 120 frames a second. She has 300 images in a little folder that she can flip through until she finds the moment the girl is at repose, the moment that's the height of the jump, and the moment she's coming back down. She said in one shot, she had 5 different portraits. I want that. No, those are raw. Yeah. About 28 megapixels a piece, which you understand. I mean, otherwise you'd be blowing through terabytes, right? We're already blowing through terabytes. I know. My clients are like, what do you mean you're not saving them for 20 years anymore? And I'm like, I don't have room. I'm running out of room. 2 years. That's all you get anymore. What other questions do you have for me? Anybody else have something they wish they'd gotten a picture of that it's gone?
I ain't got time to wish. Just move on.
Take the pictures today.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What happened, happened.
It's true. I like Chuck. He's got a good vibe.
Bill don't like me. Dave don't like me. I'm glad somebody does.
That's okay. We'll keep you.
Nice. Well, I've so appreciated and enjoyed being with you tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You bet.